recognize that you don't have to know everything or have the skills or even have the team necessarily to accomplish what you want in public sector. There's a lot of us that are willing to help and help guide organizations. I think often public sector folks think they got to do everything themselves, and we don't always have the right people or the right skill set for that, right? And you have to rely on one another. I truly just appreciate all of our public servants and our public servant leaders in particular. It's a tough gig, but it's worth it, right?
Hello and welcome to The Clear Voice, brought to you by Clear Career Professionals. I'm your host, James Groom. I'm joined today by Clear Career Professionals President, Michael Boese. Welcome back to the show, Michael.
Thanks, James. It's great to be on again. And, one of the most fun things we have about doing these podcasts, or one of the reasons I love coming on, is you always have such great content and so many good guests coming through. And again, today is going to be one of those guests who I think is really going to help grow folks and shape the understanding of what service looks like.
You and Clear got the privilege of helping recruit our guest to her current position. What stood out to you when you first got to meet her?
One thing that I was really impressed with our guest is her adaptability as a leader. She has an extensive background. Oftentimes, we build ourselves as leaders into those paradigms where we feel pretty comfortable, and it's hard for us to break out of those. Something that she was able to do, I think, is be real adaptable and kind of mold that leadership and take on just challenges that are maybe outside of what she's always comfortable with. And I think that's a really great characteristic that I noticed early on.
Today, we're joined by Katie Hagen, CEO of CPS HR Consulting. Katie has spent decades in the public sector in leadership roles, including at the state level, and now leads one of the most unique organizations in the public sector HR space. Katie, welcome to The Clear Voice.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We're honored to have you on. Katie, you've seen government workforce issues at a level most people never will. What's the one problem that most organizations don't even realize they have?
Well, I don't know if they don't realize that they don't have, but a very common problem that I've seen across every public agency I've engaged with has been hiring challenges. I think often people immediately think that their hiring challenges are directly tied to salary. As an example, it's public sector is frequently seen as not being as competitive in salaries. And I think the immediate assumption on why folks are unable to fill their vacancies in the public sector is because it's the salary or the benefits. What I've found over the last 30 plus years in the public sector is often some of the challenges we put in place ourselves for our applicants going through the hiring process. And as a result, I've spent a big chunk of my career trying to streamline hiring processes in public agencies to really be able to bring people on faster and really try to identify the skills that we need that are very unique in the public sector.
Yeah, it's a frequent topic that we hear is salary is not always the most important. And Michael and I are working on a recruitment right now. Salary is a question about it when we're talking to potential applicants, but they're also talking about work-life balance, remote work options, flexible schedules, a bunch of those other things. And some of them don't really cost anything, but they are something that you'd have to transform your organization potentially if you're going to look at some of those options. Do you find that sometimes public sector agencies, when they determine that it's just salary, they stop asking questions and they just continue doing the same thing without exploring other options?
I've seen evidence of people sort of giving up, like, there's just no way we can hire, 100 people or what have you with the salaries that we offer. And don't get me wrong, salary is very important. People wouldn't work, if it wasn't, but it's just one, as you said, it's just one thing that you need to look at when you're considering the various challenges. Geography is important, especially in an era of working from home, but there's a lot of things the public sector can offer that sometimes takes some creativity to figure out how to sell the job. I'm excited about our next generation, and their sort of view on public service is really refreshing, but they're going to require that we be more flexible going forward.
When you talk about this generation, I hear a lot of bad things from people my age and especially a little bit older than me. But, in my experience, talking to a bunch of them, they seem like they're right up our alley because they're very idealistic. They want to make a change. In a private company, you have to invent a way to make it seem like it's something you're contributing to society, whereas that should be built into the public sector, even if we don't advertise it.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I really think this next generation, they don't get enough credit. I mean, they're young. They're still coming into the workforce, but they're so pragmatic. I also have two sons that are entering the work era, and I'm just so impressed with their interest in public service, their friends' interest, but they're pragmatic about it. They're not cynical, and they know that the systems do need to improve. They're not fooling themselves, but I think what gives me hope is that they think public service matters and that their role can make a difference. It's very refreshing to see that.
Yeah, I agree. Can you tell us how you got started into HR and what started your journey and how did you end up where you got to?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. As I mentioned, I have almost 30 years in state government in California. I've worked in a variety of agencies. I started my career in the correctional setting. I worked for the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation and spent most of my time there doing recruitment and selection for peace officers and medical personnel. About 15 years ago, I made a change and went over to CalPERS, which is our pension system in California. I really cut my teeth there in HR as the HR chief. Really great organization that really sort of acts more like a private company than a public agency. So I learned incredible lessons there as a practitioner. And then I moved into Cal HR, which is the policy setting control agency for human resources in California. It was at Cal HR that I was appointed by the governor of the administration in California, then Jerry Brown. I moved around a few times in political appointees. I went to the Department of Tax and Fee Administration. From there, I was appointed to the Department of Industrial Relations. In the last decade or so, I've been appointed to positions that require a turnaround of some sort. So I sort of broke away from my HR background and moved into organizational leadership roles as the chief deputy, director initially, and then eventually the director role. I was asked to come and help make change happen. And they were for different reasons in every position that I held. But it was either leading teams, of different sizes to address significant organizational challenges. In one case, it was civil service reform. We were really working on changing HR policies in the state of California. I moved over to the Department of Tax and Fee when it became a new public agency. It used to be called the Board of Equalization. After a very public newspaper expose, the department was disbanded and a new one was created in its place. And I was asked to help lead that new organization. So really, my skill set evolved from the traditional HR practices to really focusing on change management and bringing the organization along. Although I don't think it's a coincidence that I have an HR background. There's a lot of people issues involved in changing an organization, and hiring was at the core of problems that these departments face. Infrastructure needed to be reevaluated around the hiring process. Policies needed to be put in place, and really just sort of focusing on helping the organizations recover from a public crisis. Unfortunately, I think a lot of us in the public sector experience those public crises. It's the HR experience, I think, the skill set that I learned over time as an HR practitioner that really helped prepare me for that.
Being that change agent in so many positions, do you feel like that gave you way more tools than if you'd led a couple of organizations for a short time that maybe had their stuff together? I mean, obviously you would have brought in improvements, but taking something that may be broken or close to it and then totally revamping it, how was that for your skill set?
Yeah, it's a great question. I had the luxury of working for an organization that really was on the cutting edge of HR practices. I'm so happy that I had that experience because I knew what was possible. Often in public sector, you don't have the resources you need to, say, engage in an incredible marketing campaign, to attract nurses or whatever to your organization. And you have to figure out yourself. How do I get the word out with $100? How do I get the word spread? And you don't have the luxury of a big marketing budget. Because I saw both sides, I got to experience, a really well-funded, well-operating organization. And then I worked for organizations that were general fund dependent. They had a tighter budget. They weren't self-funding their organization. It's a different way of budgeting and sort of living within your means. I think I was able to see what was possible from those experiences and learn to be creative. I make it sound like I did all the work, but really it was my team that did all the work. But I was able to ask the question, well, what can we do to get the word out to hire tax auditors? Have we tried a one-day job hiring fair? We don't necessarily need to advertise in newspapers anymore. Let's try social media posts and things like that. I think having had both experiences, working for corrections, many of your listeners who work in law enforcement probably know corrections is one of those agencies that don't always have the resources they need to do marketing or even work on some HR policy implementation as they would like to. You have to get creative with that. And I've never seen a situation in state government that wasn't solvable if you used a little creativity. Your budget may be a different issue, but there's a lot of things that you can do within the parameters of public service that can get you where you need to be.
For a lot of our audience, city managers and other department heads, they're probably listening to your story and trying to figure out how you survived the political system in California for so long. It's a little bit different. It's, local politics usually that they're dealing with, but it can't be much easier at the highest levels of the state government in California.
I was thinking about that as we were talking the other day. Like, there are a lot of parallels between state and local government, and probably the politics is one of those. We all answer to someone, right? Whether it's the citizens in your city or your California, of course, we have very strong unions. My stakeholders for many years have been various union labor groups. But yeah, it's up and down. It depends on the administration. It's very different from one administration to another. I think one of the most interesting experiences I've had in my prior state appointment as the director of the Department of Industrial Relations is I had the new experience of having 7 independent boards and commissions that were under the umbrella of the department. So they didn't report to me, but they were under our departmental umbrella. So they received all the administrative support from my team, but they were independent entities, and they themselves were either appointed by a board or appointed by the governor themselves. So in many respects, they were my peers. That was really a great experience. Like, I was a little worried when I took on the role, like, oh, how is this going to work, with all these independent folks relying on services from my team. And it was lovely. Like, it was a lot of work, but I had to invest in building relationships with the heads of those boards. I met all of their support staff. If they had them, there were some that weren't staff. I met all the board members and actually requested to be part of some of their meetings on an ongoing basis so I could keep them apprised of what's going on in the department, how we support them. And it was a great experience. They'd never had that level of interaction with the director prior. And all of them were just so appreciative to have that connection and to know that, they could reach out. A lot of people were like, wow, do you know what you're getting yourself into with 7 independent boards and commissions? And so I went into it carefully, but it was a great experience. We didn't always agree. In a couple situations, the boards were there as a check and balance of what we were doing, right? There was appeals functions. There was a health and safety component that kept an eye on what we were doing in Cal OSHA. So there was a lot of checks and balances. We didn't always agree, but there was mutual respect there. So I can totally relate to what happens in city councils and in the cities around the country where they have a board and they have stakeholders that are very vocal. We also have a lot of public hearings and the like. So I think there's a lot of parallels. I don't think that I have the secret sauce necessarily on how to survive, but it's all about how you treat people. I believe I'm there to serve, and it doesn't matter if you report to me, if you're a member of the public, if you're on an independent board.
Michael, when you think about it, would you rather get an angry call from a mayor or a governor? And how do you survive that political world?
I think that's a tough call. I've never worked directly, for a governor, but I can imagine there's a lot of vested interests that they're trying to work with as well. It's interesting in government and how we work with so many different communities, just like Katie does across the country, is people are passionate, particularly passionate about the place they live. That's something that, we that are government practitioners really need to try to help embrace that passion and then turn it into a functional policy or operational standpoint that is actually helping them achieve, some of the things that they're going for. And I think that's where the real breakdown is some local leaders, and I'm sure even state leaders, are very interested in achieving a goal, but how we can help advise them on getting to that objective is really important for us.
Passion is correct, especially on the local side. Katie, when you talk about your transition to CPS HR, what attracted you to the role, and has anything surprised you moving over there?
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of being a client of CPS HR Consulting. And for those of you that may not be familiar with what we do, we are a joint powers authority. So we are a public agency ourselves. We were established back in 1985 as a self-supporting public agency that provides a full range of HR solutions. Federal, state, local government, public safety, special districts, nonprofits are all who we serve. Essentially, we were created by a group of government entities that serve a very unique need in the public sector. They all got together and said, we don't have experts in these areas, and we're going to form an agency that can help us fill this need. I think it is really a unique. I'm unaware of any similar JPA. There are a lot of JPAs in California, especially, but not one focused on HR consulting. And so I think we're pretty unique there. I'm a huge fan, always have been, of CPS HR. It's a dream for me, really, to come over as the CEO. It's my great honor. I think of myself as an HR practitioner, although I haven't practiced in many, many years. I just love everything about whether it's recruitment, hiring, classification, work studies, org assessment, you name it. I just really enjoy the HR environment. To live and breathe it and talk about it all day long every day is really exciting for me. And it's fun being able to spend time on it. As a leader, you're pulled in a lot of different directions, especially with large state agencies, which has been my experience. But now I get to just focus on HR issues and then also help public agencies solve really complex problems. I couldn't ask for a mission that I'm more aligned with. But the people is really what, impressed me the most since I've started. My team is incredible. We're very lucky that we have very long tenured employees at CPS HR. I've never quite seen anything with the tenure that we have, which I think speaks to our unique culture, similar mindset. Everybody's there because they want to serve the public. And just the depth of expertise has amazed me. We have about 100 permanent employees, and they're located across the country. And then we have another couple hundred intermittent consultants that we use for unique projects and for our training classes that we're probably best known for. I think a lot of people know us through our training, but we're also, I think, selection assessment center. We're very well known for that, and just our general HR consulting services as well.
You cited the culture as one of the reasons that you've got long tenure. How do you keep that culture together when you've got employees across the country?
It's a good question. Since the pandemic, we've worked remotely pretty significantly. We do have a small number of people that come into our Sacramento office on a regular basis, but we have staff, I think, in 32 states across the country. It's not an entirely new model for the organization. We did have staff in other parts of the country prior to the pandemic. So we've always had sort of a quasi in-office work from home model. We have to focus on keeping connected through regular team meetings. We bring people together once a year in Sacramento to do training and professional development and just enjoy being around one another in person rather than on Zoom. I think we're just very focused on providing consultation services to the public sector, and being in other locations throughout the state gets us closer to them, right? And so that too is a big part of our culture.
When you look at the state of recruiting for, especially when you're talking executives and things like that in local government, what is CPS HR seeing across the country?
We see a little bit of everything. I think that public sector recruitment and hiring in particular is in transition. I think it's constrained, but state and local governments are still adding jobs and they're still hiring workers. However, when hiring's happening, it's hard to fill roles, right? So I don't know if that's any different than it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago, but that's what I'm seeing. We're seeing competition, of course, with private sector pay, retirement, fewer qualified applicants. There's persistent talent gaps that we hear from our clients. Those are in public safety primarily, police, corrections, but also infrastructure type jobs like engineering, finance, even accounting, IT, healthcare services, social services in some cases. I think public sector is getting better at thinking of ways to attract folks. We have clients that offer signing bonuses, revamp benefits packages. They're implementing more flexible policies, but public agencies are still struggling, to keep up with that changing workforce demand. But I have seen a number of public agencies across the country move towards more skills-based hiring over degrees, which I think makes a lot of sense for most public service jobs. Not all. I think we do need to have some specialties with the degree still. And some employers are experimenting with non-traditional talent pools. I don't know if you saw a recent article about the FAA looking for gamers for their control tower positions. I thought that was really interesting. And then, apprenticeship programs. You see a lot of public agencies looking at apprenticeship programs as a new way to earn as you learn kind of a model. So yeah, I don't know if it's drastically different from what we've been seeing the last 10 years, but that's my assessment post-pandemic too.
I know you mentioned finance directors, and I would encourage any city to hold on to their finance director if they can, because they do seem to be in very short supply across at least Texas and some of the recruitments that we have out of state. How can cities better create that pipeline from college into some of those roles that we're seeing those shortages in engineering and finance and some of those other things are in desperate short supply for cities?
I really like the internship programs as one example. In fact, Plano offers a really interesting student intern program. I think you had LaShawn Ross on a recent podcast. I really liked it because it's a true partnership between different public agencies where they're bringing students in to participate and learn about the public sector. I have to admit, I'm very interested in internships at the moment because I'm trying to help my son find one this summer. So it's on my mind. But yeah, I think we've got to think about it differently, and internships are a great way to see if it's a fit for people, garner interest. If they have a great experience, they're going to go back and tell their friends at college, what a great organization that they worked with. And looking at other ways, like I mentioned, apprenticeship programs, we've been pushing on those in California as a way to bridge staffing shortages that we see. Like we're just not able to keep up with home building, commercial building in California because we don't have enough skilled workers in the trades. And so there's just been a very focused effort to expand apprenticeship across the state so that we can build the workforce that we need going forward.
One of the things you mentioned earlier was that part of what you were doing in some of these roles was trying to figure out how to lessen the burden for applicants to get into those jobs. What are some of the common obstacles that cities may not even realize are in their process or that are facing applicants that want to come work for them? What can they do to make that a little bit easier?
I say look at everything. Come in and you'll have to partner with your hiring manager, your HR manager, but really ask for an overview would be my recommendation from soup to nuts. How is your duty statement drafted? What does it look like? Does it use common terms to the industry? What does your advertisement look like? Are you using positive language in your job posting? Or are we scaring people away by the way we're describing the job? And I tell you this because I've seen it over and over and over again, evidence of bureaucratic language that ends up in these job postings. I'm sure you all see this as well. And I just don't think people can relate to it anymore. We're dealing with a digital workforce age, right? Like the people that we're recruiting by and large into our positions have had smartphones their whole lives practically, and they're not used to bureaucratic processes, and they have a different expectation in terms of timing and when they'll hear back from people. As I said, they're pragmatic, I think, but there's only so much that I think that they'll accept before they get frustrated. And I think our hiring process is frequently in the public sector very bureaucratic. I tell folks all the time, conduct a comprehensive review of your process and see if there's anything that you think is deterring candidates from coming and or dropping out along the way. We've done time to hire studies where you look at why is it taking us 6 months to hire someone? It shouldn't take that long. And you find different sort of roadblocks along the way. It might be sitting too long with a hiring manager doing reference checks, or it's sitting too long in HR because you've asked the candidate for their grades and they can't find them, or whatever obstacle you might find, and just really trying to get in there and try to make some tweaks to the process. It's already hard enough to find these folks. When you get them, you got to be focused on keeping them in the process, or you're not going to find the sufficient numbers and the people that are qualified to do the job.
Michael, I know this is a frequent topic that we've talked about over the years, and probably one of the reasons that Clear was founded. Do you have anything to add about what these barriers could be?
We live in a world where it's pretty easy to focus on our process, and process is a very important thing, but sometimes we lose focus of the people. And you're right. When we were working on building Clear, that's one reason we have a candidate relationships team that's in constant contact with our candidates. Is I and other people feel like there's a way that we can connect with people and make sure that they're involved in the process throughout so that we don't lose them. Maybe even if they are looking for other work, that we are collaboratively working and understand that perspective that then we can give to the cities and let them know that the time pressure on that. It's interesting, there's some cities out there that are still requiring a paper application. Sometimes that can be a deterrent, especially for younger generations coming in and trying to fill out, a piece of paper in order to get a job. I always like those cities who maybe allow paper applications because some people do feel comfortable with that, but also how do we enable electronic applications? We have a world of AI that's really going to be pressing. I know we use AI on some things, but maintaining that personal contact, and then how do we find that proper balance between how much is too much artificial intelligence and where do we really draw that line between what's good and then what we see as maybe fake? How do we catch those little things that are going on? So it's an exciting time, I think, to be involved in the HR consulting world and really trying to help find some of the innovative solutions to this. And I know Katie and her team are on the forefront of that as well.
Katie, you talk about the change agent that you were in a lot of places, and then, of course, coming into CPS HR, it doesn't sound like they were necessarily looking for a change agent. The ship was going in the right direction, and they just needed somebody to take the helm. How important is it to find the right fit for not just the organization, but where that organization is?
CPS HR enjoyed great leadership for a number of years. I would say that I think you always need a change agent to keep an organization going forward, particularly like Michael talks about in this era of AI. We're all still learning the limits and the capacity of AI. I can't tell you, you can't read an article or take training or go to a conference or anything without there being something. People presenting on AI and the uses. My hope is that I can bring leadership to the CPS HR team in that changing environment of technology. I think we're just seeing the start of what is to come in AI. And frankly, there's a lot of public agencies that are a little bit AI shy still. And quite rightly, we need to be cautious particularly about what we put out there in ether in the form of a question or query. We need to help educate our public agencies as we work with them on how to best use AI. That is a service that we can help folks with. I think there's always room for improvement, and I would really like to help CPS HR move into the next decade of increasing use of technology throughout the world of HR, whether it's selection or class and comp studies, workload studies, search, training, whatever it is. We really need to be looking at the future in terms of how do we become more efficient in offering public service, because like I mentioned earlier on, we have just limited resources in the public sector, and we have to make sure that we're serving our constituency the most efficiently that we can. And technology is the way you do that. That's what I hope I can bring to the CPS HR team.
Technology is certainly a game changer and a force multiplier. But when you think about HR, human resources, how do you balance the need for that technology and also keep the human in there and keep them engaged and feeling like they're not just talking to an AI agent when they're trying to get a job or something?
I don't believe AI is going to replace humans. I've said that many times. And I think at any presentation that you've gone to, if you participated in an AI sort of class, you'll hear that it supplements what we do, and you're always going to need humans to verify data. But absolutely, human resources is about people, and it's always going to be about people, and it's just another tool. AI is just another tool that helps us be more efficient. I myself find it marvelous every day what it can do in terms of like summarizing information or visually portraying information. It's just an amazing tool. It does not replace workers in any capacity. And I think we're starting to see that. There was an article this week, I think it was IBM, that announced that they were hiring, 600 new staff because they realized AI wasn't all that, that it was not going to replace their workplace. And I sent that to everyone I knew because I wanted them to see, hey, look, they're realizing in corporate America that you cannot replace people. You have to just view this as another wonderful technology tool. You still need judgment. You need passion, especially in public service.
Earlier, you talked about working inside a organization that dealt with a lot of civil service employees, of course, across the country, and in Texas and California have a lot of those, and a lot of times they're public safety, which is a large part of your budget as well. How challenging is it working inside those systems, and what advice do you have to city managers that may be moving into a city, or maybe civil services coming and they need to figure out what they're going to do about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Being in a new role myself these last few months, my advice would be to take your time in assessing the landscape of your organization. So whether you're interested in joining, a new organization, city, county, a new leadership role, or you've just joined, I cannot emphasize enough, take your time to really review the applicable data in your organization. Talk to leaders, talk to stakeholders, talk to the team members, the rank and file staff, review process and policies, ask questions, observe service delivery, request backlog data. That's always very telling. Review prior audits, review budget data, org charts, like really just dig in and ask those questions, because in every leadership role that I've been asked to take on over the years, whether it was a turnaround or implementing a new program, whatever it was, I heard a description of the problem that I was being asked to solve. And then when I arrived, it was a very different problem, and much more complex, right? Like there's just that general assumption there's more to the story. I really am a big believer in coming in and just doing a deep analysis. And you don't have to do it yourself. That's what you have a team for. But just be very inquisitive and ask questions and get the full picture before you develop an action plan and you start to implement on that to solve a problem. Too many times I've seen folks come in and try to quickly solve something in the first 30 days. And sometimes you have to. In a time of crisis, you've got to do that. I experienced that during the COVID pandemic. And so I know you've got to move quickly. But many of these problems, like infrastructure problems, have been around for many, many years, and it's okay to take some time to study it for a few months until you're confident of, what you need to work on first. That's my advice, is just really get your arms around the problem, the true problems, the root problem, and then start to really dig in and make changes.
Michael, you've worked in both civil service and non-civil service organizations. I've seen a lot and heard a lot from leaders who sometimes just want to throw their hands up and not solve the problems that they see because the system is difficult to work inside. What do you have to say to them?
Yeah, I think there is something to be said, exactly what Katie was talking about, as far as understanding the complexity and really, utilizing those analytical skills. I want to say, don't give up on the simplest answer. We'll look at a problem, we'll maybe come up with something as a leader that seems too simple. And then we shy away from that. And we really try to, keep increasing the ability of our scope to do something more. And a lot of times what I found is that often the most complex problems have boiled down to a breakdown in communication and listening somewhere along the line. And, if you can kind of really rely on that simplicity and try to go, hey, and that may not solve the problem. I'm just saying, don't be afraid to, find a simple solution that may have been missed and overlooked, because we're constantly looking at that analytical piece and how do we make this and solve this huge issue. I think the other thing that I was so impressed with Katie, and one reason we love working with CPS HR is there are so many great mentors out there, and it can be, mentors that are, in the same field as you. It can be people in other companies and things like that. But the more we rely upon each other and bounce questions and kind of let other folks know what we're going through, and then have the ability to work together to solve some of these problems, is one of the most amazing things kind of working in the government sector, whether that's local or state.
Yeah, it's definitely nice to be able to talk to people. And that was one of the things I was worried about coming into the private sector side of things, even working with government, is I had a problem or a question. There were probably 10 other police chiefs that I could easily pick up the phone and get their advice on. And I didn't know that was going to exist in the private sector because there's competition, but being able to have that relationship with CPS HR and a number of other companies that are in our space or, in adjacent spaces, and certainly those ones that work with the government don't really do anything that we do. It's been nice to be able to see that it's not always about the bottom dollar for everybody. It's really about how can we improve things for everybody the best that we can.
Absolutely. And I just want to echo that I really appreciate the partnership that we enjoy. And I think we each have unique expertise and experience, and I feel like our partnership recognizes that. I think we both have a passion, both organizations have a passion to serve, and our clients can see that, I think.
Katie, when you look at HR inside of organizations, what are some things that maybe across the board HR professionals need from their organization or leaders that they are missing too often?
I think I would say really professional development. Is that too simple of a response? I think we kind of get away from that because HR is frequently the area of the organization you go to for advice. I think there's this, I don't know, that there isn't the focus on continual skill development in human resource professionals as there should be. If you've ever gone through a budget cut, you probably cut your training budget first. year over year, that can really be detrimental to your team members. We all need to have time dedicated to focusing on skill development to remain relevant and innovative, and frankly, to sometimes it's hard working in public sector, and going to a conference and hearing all the exciting things that are out there can be restorative, I've found in my career, and energizes folks. And so I really would love to see more and more employers invest a little bit more in their HR community and encourage people to get their HR certification, or whether it's SHRM or the public TMHRA, the public sector equivalents. There's just a lot of really great professional development opportunities, and I think it just helps our whole industry when folks are regularly professionally developed.
Yeah, for somebody like HR and really all department heads, they're tasked with taking care of people. Not always, but I think sometimes the people that are in charge of those people forget that they might need that encouragement. They're all busy. If they're not getting encouragement to do so, then they may skip that because they know they need it, but they have a lot of things to do. So I definitely agree that going in and making goals for those people, if you're in charge of people that are at the top, whether it be HR or somebody else, getting them some educational goals, I think is great. So let's talk about the future of the public sector workforce. We talked a little bit about AI and a lot of the current challenges, and we've talked about the new generation coming in. So what are your predictions about what it's going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I talked a little bit about the challenges in bringing people on. I do think that's going to continue to be a need that our clients in the public sector need our help with. We talked about technology being another big piece of it. We've been seeing a lot of organizational assessment work recently, in probably the last 6 months to a year. We've been seeing an uptick and people just really wanting some help to come in and look at their organization and ask for comparisons to other similar organizations or recommendations for streamlining, really just help, like Michael was talking about. It's also a frequent thing. I think when I get a call from a colleague, it's usually, hey, what do you think if I redid IT sort of questions? And so I think people are really needing some assistance in reimagining what their organizational structure might look like and how that impacts our jobs, right? I think AI is a part of that, frankly. We may not need as many entry-level roles. Maybe we want to reclassify positions and have more higher level classifications doing the more complex work. And we can substitute some of that lower level need with new automated tools. Just as an example. There's a lot of call in the public sector for folks needing some help reimagining their structure. So I really think that's kind of an interesting new area for us.
Yeah, anytime we talk about organizational assessments, Michael makes sure that I mention that you don't have to wait until something's on fire to call either us or you. Do you feel the same way?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Earlier the better. You can just talk to us, give us a call, talk to us and see if we can help. You don't necessarily need a contract to talk to us. We're more than happy to brainstorm and see if we can be of help.
Yeah, James, I wanted to mention on kind of the future landscape there with the way technology is advancing. My thought is development is going to become so much more important than it even is today. I know most organizations are pretty consistently looking at how to develop employees, but really when we have, a lot of these, core functions that sometimes really help people learn the skill sets required to move forward and advance their, executive skills, leadership, and knowledge. How do we make sure that they're getting the reps on that without really, breaking away from technology, but how do we include them in that? And so really focusing in on development. And I know CPS HR has their mind on that too. They do a lot of testing and education and things like that. I'm really excited to see programs that you guys are going to develop, moving forward to continually invest in folks. And we see this like in a law enforcement kind of standpoint, when you're bringing newer people in and they have to talk to people and maybe they're a younger generation and they just haven't developed those skill sets to have a conversation. That's such an important component of what police and fire organizations are doing throughout the country, is just teaching people how to talk. But, it's those things in many different areas where that development is going to be so much more important.
That's interesting. I recently, as part of my onboarding at CPS HR, I've been trying to understand our most popular training courses and what lines of business are in demand. And the number one course that folks contract with us to take is not an HR course, which is what I assumed. It is a computer technology, like basic Word and Excel class. So it just goes to show you that we can't forget those fundamental skills that everybody needs, whether it's a leadership role or rank and file officer or an accountant or what have you. They all need those general skills training, in addition to leadership development skills and all those great HR track type courses. I did not know that there was such an uptick on technology, basic technology courses.
Yeah, that's my experience as well. I was excited when some of these young people would come in, and I thought I wouldn't have to teach them computers, but turns out they know tablets and phones pretty well, but they don't know even how to copy and paste.
Yeah. They can usually get PowerPoint down, but Excel.
Michael, before we leave today, do you have any final thoughts or anything that we missed?
Well, I've heard a rumor, you and me and a couple of our other team members are going to be attending the Texas Municipal Human Resources Conference here. And I've heard a rumor that Katie may make an appearance down there. So, we really value our TMHRA partners, but we would love to see her, at the conference if she's coming.
I am coming. I'm really looking forward to it. I've never been to Austin, so I'm very excited to check it out.
Good deal. Well, I think I've talked a couple of your team members into visiting the water park with me. So we're going to have to try to break away one evening and enjoy ourselves.
Okay.
But seriously, James, I think it's great to continually talk about Katie and all that her and her team is doing at CPS HR. It's a great organization, and we were so honored to, have the chance to work with them and then even be in the same space with them. And so it's exciting to have Katie on the program, and we'll have to have her back on. I know there's a number of topics we could probably delve into more extensively, but really happy to have had the opportunity to visit with her.
Thank you. Likewise, it's been my pleasure.
Katie, before we wrap up, can you tell everybody how to get in touch with you and CPS HR?
Absolutely. You can reach out to me at khagen@cpshr.us, and that's also our website address. So you're welcome to check us out or send me a note. Say hello.
What advice would you give leaders today dealing with all the challenges that they have?
I think just keep fighting the good fight. It takes a special person to be in the public sector. We have a tremendous number of challenges that we face that I don't think ever make the light of day. You have to really be dedicated to the mission of your organization. Just recognize that you don't have to know everything or have the skills or even have the team necessarily to accomplish what you want in public sector. There's a lot of us that are willing to help and help guide organizations. I think often public sector folks think they got to do everything themselves, and we don't always have the right people or the right skill set for that, right? And you have to rely on one another. I truly just appreciate all of our public servants and our public servant leaders in particular. It's a tough gig, but it's worth it, right? We all live in the communities that we serve and just really appreciate everybody.
Well, thank you for those words. Katie and Michael, thank you for sharing with us today. If we can ever be of assistance to you and CPS HR, just let us know.
Thank you.
To the listeners, thank you for listening, and thank you for what you do in your communities every day. Be sure to follow and share the podcast with others in your network. You can find current opportunities and the services offered by Clear Career Professionals on our website, clearcareerpro.com. We'll make sure to put CPS HR's website and contact details in the show notes. So if you need those, you can go there. Follow Clear on LinkedIn, and we will catch you next time.